Move on here. Alrighty, there's my other setup. Yay! So now you get to see what my office looks like. Ta-da! Of course, it's like every other office. It's strategically set up to promote role-play games and the like. Miniatures behind me on one side, role-playing books on the other. But I wanted to talk about something, this being the beginning of the holiday season. I want to talk about what NycosRPG and Nycos Launchpad is to me, and that is that I believe it is becoming dedicated to the proposition. Now, that phrase I'm stealing directly from the Gettysburg Address, right? In that statement, he says he's dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, blah, 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 blah. Right? So I am dedicated to the following propositions, the entire series of them. And I want to see if you can see why we should be possibly dedicated to the same thing, no matter where you are and what you're doing. I believe that I am dedicated to the proposition that we are all still children. Yes, I am 60. I know that's 6 decades, and there are people in this audience that go, wow, I didn't know anybody that old still lived or could even use a camera. I know, I'm being silly. But the idea is that we're all kids. We're still kids. Inside, when we're grown up, look at how many of our terms, even when we're in work, we talk about gaming the system, we talk about keeping score, we talk about making it to the finish line. All of these game reference terms are in our lives, right? We are still children, and I don't know whether that's in your case whether that means you're being childlike and innocent and hopeful and enthusiastic like I am, or if it means you're taking the more childish side. But the reality is that we're all kids, and even if somebody gives you grief, you have to think about it from the standpoint of kids in a playground. You're going to have problems, you're going to have issues, and it's how we learn to communicate. I also believe that I also am dedicated to the proposition that we are meant to become more. In most people's lives, they follow their path through college to get to a career, and then they go into the job and they absolutely hate what they're doing. What I'm talking about is you need to be able to recognize that there is more to life. If you know anything about me, you know I've had more jobs than most people have had ideas. I'm a former air traffic controller, former microwave antenna installer, former cellular technician, landscape owner. I owned a landscaping company. I owned a window washing company. I owned a delivery service. I worked with one of the largest producers of trading cards in the world, the largest producer of trading cards in the world, Konami Digital Entertainment. I worked as the marketing director for Gamma. I've been a short order cook. I have just, you name it, I've done it. And the issue here is that we're always becoming more than we were before. In the last 10 years, I've written 350 books. I mean, how many people can say that they've chased every possible avenue of their life? And kids do it. When you're a child, one minute you're an astronaut, the next minute you're a police officer, and the next day you're riding the range taking care of your cattle. So we change all the time, and we always are trying to become more, because that's how life is. One of the reasons why people like role-play games is that you're able to advance through the character's life cycle, becoming, whether you're following a hero's path and you're working towards being the selfless hero, or if you're following the redemption path where you've done bad things and you're wanting to become better. These are all examples of us wanting to be more. And so I'm dedicated to the proposition that is so. I also believe, and I hold strongly to the proposition, that we are all communicators. Whether you're an individual sitting at your table at your house, wringing your hands about when the next bill is coming due and what you're going to do for work, or you're dealing with whether or not you're going to have relationships with other people outside of your family, and whether people are going to like you, or whether you're going to have people show up at your games table. These are all issues that we have, but we're all communicators. We are all talkers. My dad was in sales most of my life, sold everything you can think of, from cattle to vacuum cleaners. And in all of the different types of work that he did, he was always a salesman. And he would say, sales is what we all are. We are all salesmen because we are either selling ourselves and who we are to other people, or we're the other side, we're buying all of their garbage. And the reality is that that still is a communications process. And so I believe that we are obligated to work on becoming better at communication. I believe, and I hold to the dedication, I dedicate myself to the proposition that exploration is in our nature. We are curious beings. They say curiosity killed the cat, and that is only part of the phrase. I know there's more to it, and my friend Jean, if she was here right now, she would quote the rest of it. But we are always looking for something. There's an itch in our brain where our brain actually triggers dopamine when we're faced with an unresolved challenge. When there's a problem that pops up, we immediately feel a rush, both a positive of joy and a little bit of excitement and nervousness at the same time, because it's something that's unknown and we don't know whether it's even knowable. What I find fascinating is that exploration gene, if you will, is there regardless of what your passion is, whether you are a sculptor or whether you're a painter, role-play gamer, ice skater, whatever. You want to explore your possibilities. A friend of mine's in the skateboard community, and he's always trying to find new tricks. He's trying to find new places to ride. He's looking for new experiences, and that's what exploration is. And because we know that, a group of role players are one of the greatest places for you to explore the possibilities, because although you may not be able to get up and run a 500-meter dash, you certainly can feel the experience of it if the game mechanic gives you enough of a compelling feeling of that same rush. I also believe, I also am dedicated to the proposition that curiosity is our basic resource code. We are meant to be curious. We're meant to question. I remember when I was a kid, one of the biggest issues was that the media was worried about guys like Timothy Leary, because he was very much avant-garde, very much on the edge, and he constantly said, question authority. And at the time, that was thought to be a bad thing. But the questioning authority is what we do. It's how we learn when we're children. Why do we reach for the stove when our parents say, don't touch the stove? Because we want to know why. We want to understand that. You know?
The minute you say don't do something to a kid, they're gonna be like, huh?
Exactly. And it's in that moment of discovery, or that moment of desire, that we're getting our biggest high, if you will, internally. That's what we're meant to do. Now, I do also believe, and I hold very much to the proposition, that sharing is a natural condition. And I think it may actually be one of the reasons for our greatest problems in our culture, is that we all want to share ours. What we have, we want to share with others. And we think we're doing so that they will be edified. But that's not what it's about. It's like, that's only part of it. If I'm sharing with you, then I should, by quid pro quo, be allowing you to share with me. And maybe we disagree. Maybe we have differences of opinion. If we don't learn how to share what we have, and to accept the sharing of others, we never cross those bridges. We never answer the unanswerable, because we're so busy worrying about what we're going to say next instead of listening to what the other people say. And I think that this sharing is essential. And to me, it's mind-blowing that we do not recognize that our sharing sometimes is misplaced. In other words, if I am with a group of people who I can tell are going to be, the things that are going on around, they are not going to be amenable to my opinion, I probably should just go ahead and not share. even though my desire is, and my optimal condition is to share, Maybe what I need to do instead is listen, be on the receiving end, and let them express their position. Doesn't mean I have to agree with it. It just means that I'm being decent to them and letting them gain the benefit of sharing their side. I also am dedicated to the proposition that the most common denominator between humanity, between all species, all nations, all beings, is the imagination. Ironically, it is probably the one place where we have the least commonality in terms of use, but I believe that's changeable. That's why NycosRPG came to be existent, the reason why the Launchpad has been my vehicle for trying to get this information out. And that is that I do believe that when we learn to share, we learn to become more, and we learn to utilize our imagination for the purposes of communal conversation, like a role play game, we are giving ourselves the opportunity to learn whole new vocabularies and engage other people at the mental space that they are currently in. Now, Scott, I'm going to ask you a question. When you are in one of the situations in a game, in one of the games that I'm running, and I give you a description, what is your first inclination once you have a mental inclination on what the place looks like? What's the first thing that you think of?
Depends on the situation, to be honest. Lately, I've been like, okay, what red herring has Don trying to lead me into with this description?
Well, I guess what I'm particularly asking is, what I have found is that when I give a description, a narrative about the location, the first thing just about everybody thinks about is, where am I? In that scene, in that description you just gave, where are we? Where are we standing? What is that? What perspective do we have on this scene? What is our paradigm? And because without that, you can't make any choices about your actions, right? You have to know where you are and what's around you. That's what I would
Okay. Depending on scene to scene, the players should flow well enough that the players should be able to know where they are as the scene changes. But maybe I'm looking at it from a slightly different angle.
Well, I get that, and this is, I guess, a matter of the experiential, and we're talking in the space of possible people who have never role played in their lives. So there are going to be levels of understanding that a veteran will have, so that the storyteller will be making sure to wrap the story around them. But what I'm getting at is, even with that, it's still, okay, you described a rainfall and we're standing on a porch, I think, but am I out where I can be touched by the rainwater, or am I back behind the edge of the raindrop? You know, am I protected or not?
That's where you allow the players to ask questions to get clarification on where they are.
Exactly. And my point here is that imagination, that shared space that we have, I can describe all day long, but if I don't include the answers to your questions, then you can't be in that space. You can't interact with it because you don't know what your limits are, you know? So if I describe it as, you're on the edge of a walk, and the rain is smattering down, and across the street there's another building and it has a sloped roof, it looks like it'd be a lot more comfortable than where you are, then I haven't given you enough information. How far away is it? How long will I be in the rain? I mean, if it's 300 feet across there, by the time you get there, you're going to be soaked anyway, so it really wouldn't be that helpful.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of realizing that imagination, the use of imagination and living in a theater of the mind, you're giving yourself automatically to having the idea of communication. Because you need feedback on what's going on in the world. I need feedback to know where you are compared to everyone else. I need, it's a two-way street, and we all become better communicators through it.
That Okay, the counterpoint to that, though, I feel is everybody wants to use a virtual tabletop these days, and that, to me, is limiting.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right on both points. Number one, most people want to use a VTT. Second is that people want to. What was the other point you said that they want to use a VTT and they want to know things will be set in stone. But I'm going to make a revolutionary statement here. There is a difference between a role play game and a role play game. If you think about it too hard, you'll go like. But the difference between a role play game and a role play game is that a role play game, you're actually engaging in the role of the character, and it actually does only actually occur within our minds. If you think about it, you sitting at your table right now, you're in front of your computer talking to me. You are conversing with a person that's God knows how many miles we are apart, and yet we are sharing the communication space, right? We are taking turns talking, and we are describing things. That is role play. That is, I'm the role of a host, and you're of a guest host on the show. But this whole concept here is that we are communicating in a theater of the mind. And role playing, ROLL playing, is when you take a rule system that says things like you move 30 feet per round, you have one action, one bonus action, and one reaction. Those limitations and boundaries are built into the mechanism, and therefore players want that to be visible so that they can, pardon the phrase, optimize their actions. So to overcome that situation, you need to find ways to drag your players from role play back to role play. Now I know I keep using the same words because they're homophonic, but the whole point here is that if the game experience for a player is based on dice and charts and what's on a piece of paper, that's far different from three people standing on a porch in a rainstorm, right? So because there's no need for dice when we're just actually doing the role play portion. It's only when you come to some place where you need a variable, right?
They do plan, like, whenever I start getting into the speaker talks, that's the role playing, that's not. But because there is no dice to say what the speaker says or whatever, it's just
Oh no,
me.
there is in Dungeons and Dragons. You've got persuasion, you've got intimidation, you've got investigation. You got ways to avoid ROLE role play by using ROLL role play. It's built in, so you can completely avoid role play. And the trick is that you, as a game master, if you acknowledge that role play is actually the conversation, then you're really talking about everything being role play in that aspect. And that's where theater of the mind comes in, because you, as the storyteller, if you fill in their gaps, so to speak, in their thinking and their dimensional representation of where they are within the story, then they can make decisions without needing to see a map. And if you're doing it in such a way that it's fulfilling what the players are wanting, then they won't look to the tabletop. It's only when it's like, I think I told you about the adventure of the red hot pink Pookie Moo Moo, right? Did I tell you that story?
No, I haven't heard this one actually.
All right, so the adventure was there's a guy named his name's John Page, very good friend of mine, lives up north. He was game mastering and had built his map out, and the players had found the edge of the map, and they walked through he had actually described a door on the side of the map that would lead them off the map. So they opened that door and said, that's where we want to go. Well, not sure what to do. He said, well, it's a 10 by 10 antechamber. There are 3 exits, one to the left, one to the right, one straight ahead. There's a carpet on the floor. There's nothing in the room. You're going the wrong way. So the players chose the door on the opposite wall. You open the door, and it's a 10-foot by 10-foot antechamber with 3 exits, left, right, and straight ahead. There's a carpet on the floor. You're going the wrong way. They kept doing that because they knew that it was annoying him. They went 10 rooms in and then made a right turn and then started zigzagging back just to mess with him. But the point of this Red Hot Pink Pookie Moo Moo story is this. When your narrative is uninteresting, then the players want something to fulfill their imagination. They literally want to see the space they're in. I can bring up a story that I know you know about because you were the guy in it. There's a certain Pongid rogue who had finally gotten to use his gray-bladed sword on greylings. And I bet you still could describe what that hallway looked like. Mm-hmm. The rain falling outside and the party members protecting your back as you...
Swarms of greylings. We were, I remember lightning outside. And I just went berserk.
Right, but you remembered what it felt like running down that hallway, gleefully screaming, I got to use my sword! I got to use my sword! I remember how much you remembered about it. So my point here is that the story was narrative. We weren't using miniatures at that point. We were online. We didn't have any way to do that. So we were online, and it was a narrative, and yes, I gave a description of a location, and I gave the choices and options you had to make, and you certainly felt you were there, don't you think so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. At that time, I got Xavier at that time was still interesting.
I argue that it will always be interesting, if nothing else, because of the rest of the story that was left behind. So I think that we can talk about that a million hours, so I'm not going to go there now. But that actually leads to the next part, and that is, I believe, and I hold the proposition, I am dedicated to the proposition that telling stories is the most treasured skill in the world. If you can tell a good story, you can accomplish anything. Because if you can inspire, if you can educate, if you can entertain through your words, it is more valuable than any other skill on the planet. And what I find most fascinating about that is that it doesn't matter what your personal limitations are in terms of that. If you can tell a story, even if, let's say you didn't have the ability to speak, if you were a writer and you could convey stories, conveying stories is more valuable than any other skill. I totally am dedicated to that proposition.
I have no argument against it.
Yes. Then my final one here. Individuality is trumped only by commonality. And that sounds weird. And it's a big mouthful, and it's the way I used to talk. So let me try to bring it down and make it clear. Every person has a right and a privilege and an obligation to be their own unique self. You need to be able to hold your personal beliefs so strongly that they are yours and yours alone. But this needs to, and is required to be overcome only by the fact that we are on this rock together. We are all beings sharing this locale. And you do not have the right to impose your individuality as law on anybody else. And when we understand that our commonality is our boundaries, that we literally have to think about the fact that there are other people on the planet that disagree with us or might have different views, it makes us necessarily be more us than we are me, if that makes sense. I have the right to be me all I want, but when it comes down to it, if I'm not sharing something that we all can do, I'm depriving all of us of something which is myself. And so therefore the irony is that individuality, absolutely paramount, but it's actually tantamount, because it's tantamount to the community of everybody. We really all should be trying to, as the saying goes, get along. So these are my 9 points that I am dedicated to. For, I guess you would consider this sort of to be way in advance to be my resolutions for the end of the year. These are my dedications, if yes. So they're sort of the same.
A bit early, but okay.
What'd you say?
A little bit early.
A little bit early. Well, if I don't say them now, I'll forget them before I get to it, right? Not only that, now I've got them in written form and I've got them in video form, so people can hold me accountable early. You see how that works? Alrighty, so now we're going to move over